flowing in their veins. Mackey and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
What the hell are the Vikings doing, Mike Tannenbaum?
I think
How about that?
There has to be a belief that Kevin O'Connell feels like, hey, I could go win multiple games with Kirk Cousins. And basically what you have to think about is, like, if I set him to a one-year extension, that gives me a couple of drafts now to get my footing as a head coach, to draft his replacement. I don't think you can win with Kirk Cousins, especially in the NFC, because you think about Stafford and Kyle Murray, Dak Prescott, obviously Rodgers, Brady. I mean, he's at best, in my opinion, sixth, maybe seventh best quarterback. I think you're just signing up for more mediocrity. But if you're a new head coach, Rich, at least maybe you're saying, hey, we're going to get O'Connell established.
Welcome in, bonus scoop time. Zolgad, executive producer, as always, Declan Goff, and Darren Doogie Wolfson of Scoop fame, and also, of course, Channel 5 Eyewitness News. And Doogie, let's start with the Vikings. We are into, as we record this on Tuesday, day 2 of the legal tampering period, and just hearing there about the considered to be average quarterback, but extremely well compensated for it, Kirk Cousins. What can you tell us about what feels like during this period of time so far? Free agency, by the way, set to start 3 p.m. Central on Wednesday. What can you tell us about what the Vikings have, and I guess just as importantly, have not done yet, where things might be headed? Because I think we just lost Doogie. Yes, Declan, we just lost Doogie.
No, that'll happen. Doogie is so perplexed and just trying to figure out, just like all these guards that are going off the board, Judd, in NFL free agency. We're having the same issues with Doogie there, so that's that doesn't surprise me too much. It is interesting though, the fact that they continue to spend, as we talked about on Mackey and Judd today, that just the prioritizing of defensive tackles, the spending that they've done on them over the last few years, and Phil disagrees. Well, that was the old regime and Spielman, but then Kwesi still does the same thing, bringing in Phillips, and look, Phillips might be a stud, right? He's still young, he's 26, but I think just the prioritizing of all the money that they've handed out, $67 million over the last 3 off seasons of defensive tackles, just seems like not the most wisest place to continually spend money.
Well, and I think the real question is when it comes to the choices of where they are going to spend, to your point, where they spent or at least committed to a contract last night with Phillips. I think all of those things also beg the question of, okay, right now you've got in Cam Dantzler one starting cornerback, we think. Patrick Peterson not back. We don't know if they're going to try and keep him or not. Mackenzie Alexander, same thing, just played on a 1-year contract in 2021. We don't know if he comes back, but we know this: you need corners. And right now, with a few off the board, as we get set, as I said before, for the start of the free agency period to officially begin on Wednesday afternoon, you don't have one. Same thing, offensive line, right guard. One would think that there is no chance on God's green earth that Oli Udoh is going to come back there. Guards have been flying off the board. I mean, this is a position that back in the old days didn't get paid, but now it does. Guards have been flying off the board for 2 days now, and you still don't have one. Are you going to pursue a replacement for Garrett Bradbury, or does Kevin O'Connell truly believe what he said? And the question, I think, becomes this, and it's the one that we thought would be answered by now, and it's an internal one. Where are you going to cut from and restructure from and save money from to make these moves? Because you can't go in and just start committing and be like, oh my God, now we've got these guys, but we can't afford them. Because the most important thing is by 3:00 tomorrow, our time, you have to be in compliance with the 2022 salary cap for your top 51 players. And to get there, things have to be done. And so far, I think among the most perplexing things that we have not talked about is, besides Pierce being cut and Harrison Phillips being added, we have not seen a move yet that's going to either save to the cap because another player was cut, released, or restructured, renegotiated. That includes Adam Thielen. That includes Hunter. That includes possibly Kendricks. Like, there are options here. And I think, Dex, that we all believed that by now there would be clarity on at least that, so that you could make a move to get a commitment from a corner, right? Or from a guard, right? That has failed to take place. That's surprising. And you have to wonder if internally something is going on with a problem with an attempt of a player balking. I don't know, but you have to wonder if something is transpiring that is not allowing them to at least have that room freed up. Because I will say this, our assumption, and I know I'm going to hear this, the assumption will be, well, Judd, they've made those moves. They just aren't telling you. Okay, but logic dictates, common sense does. If they had made those moves, that they would be then getting a commitment. They haven't yet.
Right.
So there is a fighting chance that those moves, while I'm sure they are working very hard to do them, are not being made yet or were not made yet. That's where it comes back, because there is, if you plan on drafting a corner at 12, which you probably do, that don't fix the entire problem.
Right. Let's bring our guy back in here. Let's get
Nice.
Doogie back in. Doogie, you got us okay now?
Declan, Judd, you have me okay?
Yes, we
Yes. Now you sound good. You look good. I like that.
I don't know about looking good. Here's my
really
dilemma. I can do some handyman work. Installing an oven is way above my head.
Oh yeah, don't do that. That's
No.
how you accidentally kill your entire family.
Literally.
Don't be doing that stuff. No,
Oh, yeah,
that's a
with
good
the wiring and everything.
Yeah,
you're
don't do that
100% accurate. So I've got my guy Manny here.
Oh,
so he's
okay.
inhabiting the kitchen. And so my normal setup didn't work. I went downstairs. That failed miserably. Now I'm upstairs in Keaton's room.
Okay, what can you tell us, just to get right to the scoops, what can you tell us about the Vikings, what you've heard, and as we record this at 11:15 on Tuesday, what you think might be coming?
Well, Judd, they have reached out on a number of still available free agents. Many free agents have come off the board, but new names I can provide you: Za'Darius Smith, Darius Williams. Za'Darius Smith, the former Packers pass rusher; Williams, the former Rams cornerback. I wrote down a few other names as well. I guess this wouldn't be a new name, but they have spoken with Patrick Peterson's agent about a reunion. I had the mini scoop this morning on Twitter. Jordan Berry, the Vikings are bringing back their punter of a year ago. I did hear a little bit of the lead-in to me that you started the scoop session here. I heard you discuss whether maybe some stuff is going on behind the scenes. I heard you use the word balk. Michael Pierce balked.
Right.
Plan A was not to bring in Phillips from the Buffalo Bills. They did want Michael Pierce to return. They offered him a pay cut, a restructure. They were going to chop a year off his contract, allowing him to reach free agency 1 year from now, not 2 years from now. Remember, he signed initially a 3-year deal, but he sat out the COVID year. So, the first year of the 3-year deal essentially was 2021. So he was supposed to enter year 2 of a 3-year deal. They were willing to lop off that third year, but he had to take a pay cut. He decided too many questions, I'm told, about this switch to a 3-4 base. Even though there will be multiple looks, the Vikings will have 4 linemen with their hands on the ground at times, that the base under Ed Donatel is going to be that of a 3-4, that Michael Pierce isn't so sure that he'll have the players around him to make him shine. So ultimately, Judd, he chose free agency. He asked for his release. The Vikings have officially granted his request as of this morning. So that would be one example of some balking behind the scenes. Judd, I do expect some Danielle Hunter news here pretty darn soon. They have received trade calls. You had the initial steam on the Buffalo Bills. I did hear the Giants. I don't know if it went external, but we know Andre Patterson loves Danielle Hunter. Danielle Hunter loves Andre Patterson. That there was at least some level of interest there. Now, maybe it didn't go much beyond Andre Patterson reaching out to the new Giants general manager, but definitely a name that came up in the Giants facility. That I can tell you. And I think there's probably some other names that or teams that logically make some sense for Danielle. But I think signs point to Danielle being back. Jed, I told you last week, I continue to hear that he is comfortable playing in a 3-4 base. That doesn't bother him. So I think the logical move there is you transfer this roster bonus that is due, we're talking here on March 15th. It is due the 5th day of the league year. So what is that, Sunday? By Sunday, if not earlier, the Vikings transfer that roster bonus into a signing bonus, that Danielle is back that way. I still fully expect Adam Thielen to be back, but not under his current terms, that he is going to take a pay cut, but that Adam Thielen will remain a Viking. So that will be another way that they can create some cap space.
Besides Pierce, do you expect in the coming day or so anyone else to be gone?
I'm still working on that. I wouldn't necessarily rule out Judd. I'm on record saying you didn't hire Kwesi and Kevin just to roll with the status quo.
I know
that you hired these guys for a reason. So I can't help but wonder if, there is a trade still to come, but is it now? Is it closer to the draft? I just have a hard time believing. This is a little bit more conjecture than me going all in on some scoopage here, but I just have a hard time believing that they're going to run this thing back completely, even though they are trying to spin the narrative that this is in large part Mike Zimmer's fault. Them missing the playoffs 3 of the last 4 years is a Mike Zimmer creation more than anyone else. This is not player driven. This was more Mike Zimmer driven, that this core of players can absolutely lead the Vikings not only to the playoffs, but to the promised land. I think that is an asinine take. I think this roster still needs all sorts of work. I think these players have a lot to do with them missing the playoffs 3 of the last 4 years. But there certainly is a sense behind the scenes. It's also that the Wilfs just aren't willing to hit the reset button, and I've told you, Judd, my opinion, I would have been okay. Like, now is the time with a new regime to truly hit the reset button, especially now with Tom Brady back in the NFC, that can they get to 9 or 10 wins with Kirk Cousins at quarterback? Yeah, absolutely they can. That's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to play deep into January, then into February. Do I think that this group, this core can do that? No, absolutely not.
Let's explore that path. I have heard more and more steam in recent days that Kwesi O'Connell, I'm not as sure on, but and I think he was on the fence, but that Kwesi not only received calls on Kirk,
he did receive calls on Kirk, yes.
Cleveland. I still think Carolina called, but he got calls.
He got
calls,
yes.
Yeah, and that he was very open to trading Kirk, and in fact entertained offers, and was ultimately told by the people above him, essentially, unless you're going to improve the quarterback situation for sure, you cannot trade Kirk. Have you heard that? And at what point do you think, if that's true, or you believe that to be true, at what point do you think this shifted? Because Dukes, when I covered this team for the Star Tribune, and in those days, Ziggy, not Mark, was the front guy. So that's changed. But in those days, the Wilfs provided support for sure and cash, and I'm sure they had suggestions, but they 100% allowed their football people to run the football team. If they are now, for the second consecutive March, basically saying you can't trade Kirk, and we know that Rick explored it too last year, at what point do you think this has shifted to the Wilfs going from being sort of advisors to being the people that put their foot down and are in a very different light then as far as their football ops department would be concerned?
I think they're somewhere in the middle. I don't necessarily think they're absolutely putting their foot down. I do think they're listening to Andrew Miller, the boss here in Eagan, more than ever. Going back to Kevin Warren being in that leadership role, I think Andrew Miller's influence on the Wilfs far exceeds Kevin Warren's influence. I'll tell you that much. I also think that, yes, unless there was a clear path to upgrading from Cousins, that the Vikings, especially at the ownership level, just my sense, we're not willing to, roll with Marcus Mariota, or somebody of that ilk. That's where I think the Deshaun Watson steam, there was some legitimacy. Like I volunteered last week that I know there are fans of Deshaun, the player. I'm just talking strictly the player, not the person, the player, that there are fans of Deshaun Watson, the player in Eagan. Aaron Wilson, who's very plugged in, used to cover the NFL for the Baltimore Sun, the Houston Chronicle, covered the Houston Texans for the Houston Chronicle, now works for a prominent website. He had the steam over the weekend that the Vikings had made an inquiry with Houston. I cannot necessarily confirm that. I can just tell you there are Watson fans in Eagan. But I still think that was going to be a tough trade complete. Now we have Atlanta in the Watson sweepstakes, New Orleans, Carolina, Cleveland, where Kwesi came from. His guy Andrew Berry, one of his dear friends, is in on Deshaun Watson. Like, I think there was some interest. I think that also speaks to the negotiations with Cousins' representation, that it took longer than expected, that they first met weeks ago in Eagan. They met in Indianapolis. They had a number of phone conversations, text messages. That process that ultimately ended on Sunday took a lot longer than the Vikings initially thought. That they thought that they could wrap this thing up sooner rather than later. So I think that's where the Watson steam came from, that they weren't necessarily sure they could get the Cousins deal done. I will say on Kevin O'Connell, I just know this, Judd, that O'Connell, going back to his initial Zoom interview with the committee of 7-ish people, Andrew Miller, the Ann Depners of the world, Ryan Munnins, then the in-person interview in Los Angeles with Rob Brzezinski, with Kwesi, with Mark Wilf, that he expressed optimism in working with Kirk Cousins, that they have that history from Washington, that Kevin O'Connell feels like he can win and win at a high level with Kirk Cousins as his quarterback. So do I trust that Kwesi steam you have, Judd? I do. I don't think Kevin O'Connell was necessarily on board, though, with trading Kirk Cousins.
Doogie, I want to go back to the Za'Darius Smith talker just for a second here. Do you feel that, is there a path, if they restructure Danielle, they spread out that bonus so it's not as high as a cap hit, is there a path where both Danielle Hunter and Za'Darius Smith can be on this team? Or is if they were to move on from Danielle Hunter, is Za'Darius Smith maybe their backup plan to potentially replace him?
Well, I mean, a lot of people, Declan, will tell you the cap is a myth, right? So
right.
There's always a way that if you wanted to make Danielle Hunter, Za'Darius Smith work, you could. I will add, though, Declan, on Za'Darius Smith, there's a bunch of teams that have checked in on him that, just based on the amount of interest that's being received on his front, that it's hard for me to bet on the Vikings landing Smith. But they certainly have made the inquiry. But if you're asking me to bet on a scenario, I guess I would bet on Danielle back, Za'Darius Smith landing elsewhere.
On the Wolves, sir, Karl Anthony Towns, 60 points in a win against the Spurs on Monday night. Karl Anthony Towns can get more in his contract, correct? If he's on one of the all NBA teams. I got to think at this point in time, his chances are increasing, because I give him credit. He is having a great year. Like, he is really, I think there's now an increase in confidence for sure. And probably just as importantly, or more so, maturity that I don't think we have seen previously from this guy. And we are seeing more and more with Chris Finch as his head coach.
Yes. I mean, he has transformed the way he plays, Judd. He is not settling for three-point shot after three-point shot. It's a lot more ball on the floor, driving to the basket. Chris Finch deserves all sorts of credit. So does Cat. We can debate the maturity, line of thinking with all this, just from the standpoint of, he was teed up again on Monday night. He still can't help himself yapping with the official. So there's still, here in year 7, a ways for Cat to go in that regard. But yeah, it's a reminder, this is Cat's team. That anybody who thinks this is Anthony Edwards' team, it's been trending in that direction, that Ant is the alpha. No, this is not D'Angelo Russell's team, even though he's been their best clutch player. This is not Anthony Edwards' team. This is Karl Anthony Towns' team. He is the clear alpha, the clear leader. The shot making on Monday night was off the charts. 7-11 3-pointers, 19 of 31 shots made overall, 15 of 16 free throws. Just unbelievable efficiency. And yes, if he makes all NBA, he is eligible to sign a contract extension instead of for about $170 million, for a total of just over $200 million, closer to like 202, 203, 204. So the difference is somewhere in the neighborhood of $33-ish million if he makes all NBA. And it'll be interesting. It's media who votes for that. We can debate whether that makes sense. Rudy Gobert is still an unbelievable defensive player, even though he was exposed in the postseason last year. But he's an unbelievable defensive player. Do the voters skew that way with Utah having a better record? Or do they look at these unbelievable offensive numbers? Another thing that's interesting is Bobby Marks was on the Scoop podcast, my podcast, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 weeks ago. He brought up the idea of how do you keep Jokic and Embiid off the first team? That could you make one of those guys a forward? That they've done a little bit of that stuff in the past. I mean, technically, Kat and Naz Reid have shared the floor together at times. That if you wanted to look at it and say Naz center, Kat power forward, that would there be a way to make that work? That, like, those are the two best players in the league, right? You know, with Giannis. But you can make a case, the two front runners for MVP, right? You can absolutely make that argument. Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic. That how could you have one on the second team that both belong on the first team? Now, Bam Adebayo, who we saw on Saturday, like, he's really good. Jared Allen's having a good year in Cleveland. You know, the aforementioned Gobert, but, like, to me, it would be nuts. It would be asinine. It would be ludicrous, Judd, if Karl Anthony Towns is not all NBA. Bare minimum has to be third team all NBA.
More Wolves scoops.
Well, Jaden McDaniels will get the ankle checked out later today. It doesn't appear that it's a high ankle sprain. I was told no on like a season-ending, you know, catastrophic Achilles tear. That signs point to this being an ankle injury, an ankle sprain, a significant ankle sprain. Like, I just don't see a scenario where he's playing tomorrow night against the LA Lakers. Then the Wolves begin a really tough stretch on Saturday when Milwaukee comes to town. Look at that stretch, that 10-game stretch starting on Saturday when thinking about, is there a logical path for them to jump Denver, get up to that 6th seed? So they may miss Jaden for a little bit of time, but like he should be back at some point. But we'll know more later today with the tests he'll undergo once back here in the Twin Cities. My understanding is, I don't know if they flew back late last night or this morning, but that at some point today, he'll be over at Mayo Clinic Square getting the ankle looked at. So I'm hoping to have some clarity before the day is over, but I'm just telling you, I'd be really surprised. Tough guy, quiet guy, tough guy though, but like hard for me to see him returning as soon as tomorrow. But like, you know, thinking about April 12th or April 13th play-in game against the LA Clippers at Target Center. Like, I don't think this is one that should keep him out that long, but we'll know more later today. The Clippers lose again last night, Judd. We can stop looking at the possibility of the Clippers jumping the Wolves. Like, worst case scenario, the Wolves are finishing in 7th. They are not dropping to 8th. The Clippers only have like 12 games remaining. Unless you think the Clippers are going 12-0 or 11-1, like they are not jumping the Wolves. So the Wolves, bare minimum, will finish in 7th. The question is, can they find a pathway to moving up beyond Dallas, Denver, Utah? That's tough. Denver down 19 last night in Philly. They come back and win. So it's still 2 in the loss column. The Wolves and Nuggets do play on April 1st, but Denver has a much easier remaining schedule. So like it's hard for me to see the Wolves jumping Denver. I don't think they're jumping Dallas either. So to me, Judd, like I think it's a strong likelihood April 12th or April 13th, Wolves, Clippers, Target Center, play-in tournament.
I will wrap up with this question. Very simple. What the hell are the Twins doing?
Well, I'm not even quite sure they exactly know what they are doing, just from the standpoint of they make the acquisition over the weekend, the trade with the Rangers, they bring in Kiner Falefa, and I was told by 2 high-ranking Twins officials they truly did not have any intention of trading Kiner Falefa. But the Yankees were also talking to the Rangers. I think connecting some logical dots, the Yankees put Gary Sanchez on the table with the Texas Rangers. The Rangers, no shock, preferred Mitch Garver. Of course you would prefer Mitch Garver over Gary Sanchez. To me, that's a no-brainer. So the Rangers complete the deal with the Twins, but that the Twins, once they made that acquisition, they were all about Kiner Falefa being their shortstop, that they love the glove, that there's enough there with the bat, that they felt like a clear upgrade over Andrelton Simmons, who they had one brief conversation about bringing him back. They never made an offer. There wasn't interest in bringing back Andrelton Simmons. That ship had sailed, but they felt like with Kiner Falefa, there was a clear upgrade. But then the Yankees call the Twins and say, shoot, we really wanted Kiner Falefa. We will take all of Josh Donaldson's contract. You don't need to eat a cent of it. And I think the Twins were blown away by that. I don't think in a million years the Twins felt like there was a scenario where they could move all of Josh Donaldson's contract. So once the Yankees said, we will take all of Donaldson's contract, the Twins said, okay, like how can we bypass that opportunity? A guy that has broken down, will likely continue to break down here in his, age 35 or 36 season? I forget which one it is, but mid-30s, a guy with an injury history. In all likelihood, he's going to continue to break down. So the Twins said, okay, we'll make that move. But then you look at giving up last year's first-round pick Chase Petty for Sonny Gray. That signals now he's under team control for 2023. But a move like that, giving up a first-round pick from a year ago for a 32-year-old starting pitcher, a move, by the way, that I absolutely would have made. But that signals we're not hitting the reset button, that we're trying to compete here in 2022. There is that extra playoff spot in each league. So now 6 teams will make the playoffs in the American League. Maybe we're not as good as the White Sox, but hey, maybe they suffer a couple key injuries. Maybe there is a path to winning the Central. But if we don't win the Central, there still will be 3 wild card teams or teams that don't win the division that make the postseason, that maybe we can enter that mix. Clearly, the roster still needs more work for them to be a legit playoff contender, but that they are going for it this year in many ways. So more moves to come. All that stuff is out there. I tweeted late Sunday night about the Twins have big balls in the air. Others have advanced that with Trevor Story interest, talking to the A's about Montes, about Manaea. My sense is Manaea free agent after the year, Judd, that the cost would be lower for Sean Manaea, but that the Twins are more interested in Montes, who's under team control through 2023. It would take more to get him, but that he's the guy the Twins prefer of the two. But, you know, if the cost is way over the top, you know, Manaea would be somebody that does intrigue them. They've talked to Zach Greinke's representation. They've talked to Michael Pineda's representation. Tyler Anderson is another new name. I haven't put that one out there, but he's another name. But they've made a bunch of calls. Judd, I'll give you another one. There's this Japanese outfielder, Suzuki. Forget what his first name is, but he's going to land a big contract. I'm told the Twins actually checked in on him because the Twins, in theory, have a bunch of money to spend. They don't have a need for an outfielder. He did play shortstop about 7 years ago in Japan, but he's an outfielder. And I don't see a scenario where Suzuki is landing here. But that just tells you they've at least inquired on almost every big-name free agent still on the board. They've had a number of conversations with Scott Boras going back to Carlos Rodon, Kikuchi. They were in on Kikuchi until the very end. He went to Toronto. A little bit more conjecture, but I can tell you on Kikuchi, my sense is he was not coming here for $336. He went to Toronto for $336. It would have taken more for him to come here. That was a preference for pitching in Toronto, winning organization, strong Japanese pull in the city of Toronto. Ryu is on that staff. Now, you know, Kenta Maeda is here, but Ryu is on that Blue Jay staff, that there was a clear pull for Kikuchi to sign with Toronto over Minnesota. But the Twins were in on him until the end. They did not want to touch the Rodon 244, but they had a lot of interest in a short-term deal with Carlos Rodon. So Scott Boras represents Rodon, represents Kikuchi. Guess what? He also represents Carlos Correa. So you at least make the inquiry. I'm not suggesting the Twins are landing Carlos Correa, but if you're talking to the agent, the name does come up. So they are still trying to do a bunch of stuff. They have their entire front office down there in Fort Myers, assistant GMs, Thad, Derek, they are all working it. So to be determined what exactly the next move is, but I fully expect more moves to come.
Outstanding stuff, sir. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you on Thursday for more scoopage.
Busy day, busy week. Gophers Pro Day tomorrow. It sounds like Boye Mafe. Now, if I'm Boye Mafe, I'd let my Indy numbers speak for themselves. It's not like he needs to do a lot at Pro Day. So he may not do much, if anything, tomorrow at Pro Day because he kicked complete tail at the Combine in Indianapolis. But Boye Mafe will be there, Daniel Falele, Sam Schluter, Blaze Andrews. Almost every NFL team will likely have at least, a scout there. Maybe it's a lower level scout, but just about every NFL team is expected at the Gophers practice facility tomorrow for Pro Day. Gopher basketball already working the transfer portal, may as well. Season is over. So busy time, but fun time. And we didn't even touch the Wild, what they might do with the trade deadline on Monday.
Talk to you later, sir. Thank you.
Okay, see you. Bye-bye.